No one expected that Belgium's most peaceful holiday tradition, the Brussels Christmas market, would be brought to a standstill. Thousands of families came for lights, warm drinks, and winter celebrations. Instead, they walked into a scene of confrontation, chants, and sudden chaos. Videos from that night spread across Europe within hours, not because protests were new, but because this moment revealed something deeper. A country where long-ignored tensions had drifted silently into the heart of public life. It was only one night, but it felt symbolic, because Belgium was never supposed to be the place where this happened. This is the capital of the European Union, a model of diplomacy, democracy, and peaceful coexistence. The city where world leaders negotiate treaties. The heart of Europe. But the Christmas market incident didn't appear from nowhere. It was a spark on top of decades of fractures, contradictions, and unresolved pressures that Belgium has carried beneath the surface. A country built on compromise had slowly become a country held together by threads. To understand why Belgium reached this moment, you have to understand something few people outside the country realize. Belgium was already divided long before immigration ever became a national debate. While other European countries struggled with left-right politics, Belgium faced something much more fundamental. A country split in two. In the north, the Flemish region, Dutch-speaking, economically dynamic, culturally tied to the Netherlands. In the south, Wallonia, French-speaking, once industrial, now economically struggling, culturally connected to France. Even their media is different. Their political parties are different. Their education systems are different. Two democracies trapped inside one state. Belgium isn't just divided politically. It is divided linguistically, culturally, historically, even psychologically. For decades, the country survived by avoiding the question that every Belgian knew was there. How long can a nation remain united when its two halves barely share anything? This internal fracture is the invisible background to everything that comes next. Because when a country is already split in two, any additional tension, social, economic, or demographic, doesn't land on a stable foundation. It lands on a fault line. Starting in the 1970s and accelerating in the 1990s and 2000s, Belgium experienced a significant rise in immigration, especially from Morocco, Turkey, and countries in Central Africa like the Democratic Republic of Congo. By itself, this wasn't unique. Many Western European countries opened their borders for labor migration and humanitarian reasons. But Belgium was different for one simple reason. Newcomers weren't entering one society, they were entering two, and belonging to neither. In Brussels, this dynamic intensified even more. The city became one of the most multicultural capitals in Europe, not slowly, but rapidly. Today, around 70% of Brussels residents have a foreign background. In some districts, native Belgians make up less than 25%. Walking through the city feels like crossing through multiple worlds. Languages, cultures, socio-economic realities, all within a few blocks. But diversity alone wasn't the problem. The problem was that Belgium never developed a unified integration model. Because Belgium itself wasn't unified. Flanders believed in stricter language requirements, work-focused integration, and clear expectations. Wallonia relied more on social support and softer cultural adaptation. Brussels sat somewhere in the middle, overwhelmed by demographic change and political fragmentation. There was no single approach, only three competing systems. So while Belgium was opening its doors, it never built the structure needed to bring its new residents into one shared identity. Segregation grew, language barriers remained, schools became more divided. Entire neighborhoods evolved into distinct cultural pockets, each with its own norms and expectations. The result wasn't multiculturalism, it was parallel societies. And inside these spaces, new pressures began forming. Unemployment, school dropout rates, limited mobility, social exclusion. These are the ingredients of frustration. And frustration, when not addressed, becomes vulnerability. Vulnerability to political radicalization. Vulnerability to criminal networks. Vulnerability to identity conflicts. This is how Belgium, the diplomatic heart of Europe, became home to some of the most discussed radicalization networks of the 2000s. Not because people were inherently dangerous, but because the system around them failed. Molenbeek, a municipality in Brussels, rose to international attention during investigations tied to the 2015 Paris attacks, and the 2016 Brussels bombings. Suddenly, Belgium wasn't known for chocolate and diplomacy. It was known for something else, the country where tensions had been ignored for too long. And yet, within Belgium, few were surprised, because for decades, researchers, police officials, and even local politicians warned of growing separation, not just between native Belgians and newcomers, but between communities themselves. They spoke about neighborhoods where the state's presence was limited, schools where language acquisition stagnated, youth unemployment that was double or triple the national average, and a political class, too, divided to address any problem that required national consensus. When Belgium went 541 days without a functioning government, the world treated it as a joke. A country that doesn't need politicians. But inside Belgium, it was a sign of something serious. A state struggling to manage itself, let alone new complexities. This is the environment into which migration flowed, not into stability, but into fragmentation. Not into one culture, but into two. Not into integration, but into a maze of competing expectations. So when tensions appear, in schools, in public spaces, or even during holidays, they don't come from nowhere. They come from a country that has absorbed enormous change without ever defining what it wants to be. Belgium's crisis is not sudden, it's slow, silent, accumulated over decades. And the Christmas market incident is just one moment when the silence broke into the open. Because behind the lights, behind the music, behind the festive decorations, Belgium is wrestling with a question it has avoided for far too long. How do you create unity in a country that was never united to begin with? Belgium's divisions didn't appear overnight. They were built slowly, layer by layer, until the country ended up with something no one intended. A society living together, but not living with each other. Nowhere is this more visible than in Brussels. A city that has become a symbol of Europe's future, for better and worse. Brussels is not just multicultural, it is hyper-multicultural. It hosts diplomats, EU officials, expats, immigrants, refugees, students, and families from nearly every region of the world. But beneath the surface, it is also one of Europe's most unequal and segregated capitals. Take a short metro ride from the EU quarter, polished glass buildings, multinational offices, highly educated professionals, and you enter neighborhoods where unemployment is 3 times higher, household incomes are half as large, and opportunities are limited. Yet all of this exists within the same city. This is not a clash of civilizations, it is a clash of experiences. Residents live parallel lives. They shop in different stores, watch different media, raise their children with different expectations, trust different institutions, and slowly, they stop seeing each other as part of the same society. Belgium's political system only deepens this fragmentation. In most countries, political parties represent ideas. In Belgium, political parties represent communities. There is no National Conservative Party, no National Green Party, no National Socialist Party. Every party is split in two, one Flemish, one Francophone. They do not run against each other, they run in different worlds. This means Belgium never debates as one country, it debates as two. Every problem, the economy, education, even migration, becomes filtered through a linguistic and regional lens. So when migration increased in the 1990s and 2000s, Belgium never had a unified plan. Flanders pushed for stricter integration rules, language testing, and work requirements. Wallonia emphasized social support, housing protections, and softer expectations. And Brussels, overwhelmed by demographic change, struggled to enforce either model consistently. It was a system built for compromise. But compromise only works when everyone agrees on the basics. Belgium didn't. As the years passed, these structural contradictions produced something Belgium didn't know how to handle: generational frustration. The first generation of immigrants, especially many families from Morocco, Turkey, and Central Africa, arrived with modest expectations. They worked hard, accepted difficulties, and believed their children would do better. But the second generation grew up in neighborhoods where the path upward was not always clear. They went to underperforming schools, faced language gaps from the start, felt disconnected from the wealthy Brussels they saw outside their district, and entered a labor market that statistically often treated them differently than native Belgians. Young Belgians of immigrant background sometimes felt they didn't belong in the country where they were born, nor in the countries their parents came from. This identity vacuum created fertile ground for something dangerous: parallel narratives. Narratives of exclusion, narratives of resentment, narratives that could be exploited by more radical voices, political, ideological, or even criminal. And that's when Europe began hearing a word it had barely associated with Belgium: Molenbeek. After the 2015 Paris attacks and the 2016 Brussels bombings, investigators traced part of the extremist network back to several districts in Belgium. Suddenly, the world's attention shifted to a small corner of Brussels, not because it represented Belgium, but because it revealed how deep the cracks in the system had become. Experts emphasized again and again, this wasn't about ethnicity or religion, it was about policy failures. Structural, long-term, and ignored for too long. Too much frustration, too little oversight, too few opportunities, too much separation from the rest of society. Belgium, the heart of Europe, had become a place where the state's presence was strong on paper, but uneven in reality. Meanwhile, the political consequences were building. In Flanders, the NVA rose to prominence with a platform centered on regional autonomy and stricter migration policy. But to the surprise of Europe, an even stronger force emerged: Vlaams Belang. This party became one of the fastest growing right-wing movements in Europe, winning huge support among young Flemish voters. They spoke openly about cultural imbalance, integration difficulties, and the fear that Belgium's identity was dissolving. Their message was simple: the system isn't working, and no one else will fix it. And as tensions rose, another storm was forming: the profound demographic shift inside Brussels. Today, Brussels is the only major capital in Europe where the majority of children under 18 are not native to the country's historical populations. This does not mean conflict, but it does mean rapid, intense change. A city can absorb change, but only if it is prepared for it. Brussels wasn't. Public schools in certain neighborhoods became nearly 100% composed of students with foreign backgrounds. Teachers reported enormous language challenges. Parents felt disconnected from institutions. Kids grew up without exposure to the wider Belgian society. This was not multiculturalism, it was layered isolation. Years passed, elections happened, governments fell, budgets shifted, but the core problem remained. Belgium was changing faster than the country could adapt, and yet no single event truly forced Belgium to confront this reality. Not Molenbeek, not unemployment, not school segregation, not political paralysis. Until moments like the Christmas market incident, when the quiet tension spilled into a space Belgians considered safe, joyful, and untouchable. Because that night didn't only disrupt a market, it disrupted an illusion. The illusion that Belgium's divisions were temporary. The illusion that demographic change would sort itself out. The illusion that parallel societies could coexist forever without consequence. The incident didn't begin the crisis, it revealed it. And what it revealed is this: Belgium is no longer asking whether migration or multiculturalism is good or bad. It is asking something far more fundamental. How do you build unity when your country has never had a single identity to unite around? Belgium today is a country searching for answers to questions it avoided for decades. It is not collapsing. It is not descending into chaos. But it is confronting the limits of a model that relied on compromise while the world around it changed at a speed the system was never built to handle. The truth is that Belgium's challenge is not simply migration. It's not economics. It's not culture. Belgium's challenge is cohesion, trying to build a shared identity inside a nation where identity has always been fractured. For years, Belgians accepted their internal division as harmless. One country, 2 languages, 3 governments, 6 parliaments. It was complicated, but it worked. Or at least, it seemed to. But as the population diversified, as Brussels transformed demographically, and as new communities grew alongside older ones, Belgium discovered a reality its political system wasn't ready for. Multiculturalism cannot succeed inside a country that is not united to begin with. Belgium didn't have a strong national narrative for newcomers to integrate into. It had multiple: Flemish nationalism in the north, Francophone pride in the south, European identity in Brussels, local identities in immigrant communities, and for many young people, an identity shaped by global media more than Belgian society. The the result wasn't conflict, but confusion. Confusion about belonging, confusion about expectations, confusion about responsibility. And when a society has no clear center, every group gravitates toward its own corner. Politicians debate migration, but what they're really debating is something deeper. What does it mean to be Belgian? Is it speaking Dutch or French? Is it regional loyalty? Is it European citizenship? Is it something new entirely? Or is Belgium slowly becoming a place where identity is no longer shared, but segmented into dozens of separate experiences? This is the dilemma Belgium faces. In Brussels, authorities have invested heavily in social programs, language courses, community projects, and youth outreach, all trying to bridge the gaps that widened over decades. Some initiatives show progress. Some neighborhoods are improving. There are success stories, rebuilt districts, and new generations striving for opportunity. But structural challenges remain. Schools struggle with inequality. Labor markets remain divided. Neighborhoods cluster by background and income. Political debates become more polarized each election cycle, and at the center of all of it lies a simple, uncomfortable truth. Belgium cannot solve these problems without addressing the fragmentation that existed long before immigration. This is why Flemish and Francophone politics increasingly diverge, why parties like N-VA and Vlaams Belang perform so strongly in Flanders, why Francophone regions resist certain reforms, why Brussels feels disconnected from both sides. Belgium is not only debating migration, Belgium is debating what kind of country it wants to be, if it wants to be one country at all. But despite these divisions, Belgium is not broken. It is at a crossroads where difficult choices must finally be made. Should Belgium define a single national integration model instead of two competing systems? Should it strengthen one identity or embrace multiple? Should the federal government take more responsibility? Or should regions gain more autonomy? Should Brussels remain the heart of Europe? Or should Belgium first rebuild its own center? These are not abstract questions. They shape the lives of millions of people. Native Belgians, immigrants, families who have lived in Brussels for generations. Young people searching for a future. Communities trying to make sense of where they fit. Belgium can choose many paths, but what it cannot do is continue avoiding the debate. Because when problems cannot be discussed openly, they grow invisibly, until they erupt in moments like the Christmas market incident. A moment that didn't define Belgium, but reflected it. A country where deep fault lines now reach the surface, not because people want conflict, but because the system around them never created a place where everyone truly belonged. And yet, despite everything, Belgium still has an advantage that many countries do not. The awareness that its unity cannot be taken for granted. This awareness forces reflection, reform, and conversation, even if it comes late. Belgium is not an example of failure. It is an example of complexity, a country that shows what happens when diversity meets fragmentation, when rapid change meets slow institutions, and when a divided past meets an uncertain future. What happens next depends on whether Belgium can create something it has never fully had, a shared story, one strong enough to include everyone. Because a country is not just borders and laws, it is the feeling that people, no matter how different, are part of the same we. And Belgium is now fighting to rediscover what that we means. Whether it succeeds will determine not just its own future, but the future of European societies facing similar pressures. Belgium's struggle is not unique. It is a preview of the questions every open, diverse democracy will face in the coming decades. And the world, just like Belgium, is watching. That's the end of today's video. If you liked it, don't forget to check out the next one.